Hey folks, it's Chris from the Shoemakers Academy. Today I'm going to show you how to make a shoe at home. If this is your first time, don't worry. I'm going to show you everything and all the tools you need. By the end of this video, you're going to be a real shoemaker. I'm going to guide you step by step through the process. Don't be intimidated. I promise you, it's going to be fun and easy with a little bit of patience and care. You can make yourself a nice pair of shoes. If you bought the sneaker kit, you'll have to get some of your own tools, but you'll have the pattern and the lasting board, outsole and sole stitching needle. Today I'm going to show you how to use the complete build kit. The complete build kit has just about everything you need except for scissors and glue. And hey, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the Shoemakers Academy. We are here to help. Let's get started. Step 1. From your Shoemaker Academy build kit, grab the lasting board, the footbed pattern, and the heat erasable marking pen. For this tutorial, I will be doing the left shoe. Assume to repeat all tasks for the opposite shoe, making note of when the pattern says left or right. Place the footbed pattern over the lasting board and trace the pattern with the pen. Optionally, you may choose to weigh or tape the pattern down to keep it in place while you're tracing it. There are 4 markers on your pattern to help keep everything centered. Mark the corresponding holes next to those markers onto the footbed. Now you may remove the pattern from the footbed and cut the pattern. You may use a razor knife like I'm doing, or you may choose to scissor cut the pattern. There is no exact right way. Cut it with whichever method you're comfortable with. But if you're interested in this X-Acto knife or any other optional tools or materials for this kit, please check out the Amazon list of optional tools and materials in the description below this video. Step 2. Grab the insole from the kit and trace the footbed pattern over it. Weigh or tape the pattern down as you see fit if you so choose. Cut out the pattern shape with your method of choice. I always recommend a very sharp edge for soft material like this insole. Now your footbed and insole are cut, put them aside. Step 3. Grab your tongue material and tongue pattern. Please note that the tongue patterns are left and right dependent, so please use the correct corresponding pattern. Place the tongue pattern over the tongue material. I chose to optionally tape the pattern down using low-tacked blue painter's tape. Trace the pattern over the tongue material. Since this is a low-top shoe, I traced into the low-top lines on the pattern. Trace the 2 lines for the tongue keeper. Mark out all of the holes on the bottom perimeter. In preparing to punch the stitch holes on the bottom perimeter, I placed the tongue piece over an optional punch pad. I recommend using something when punching holes to protect your work surface. You can try a plastic cutting board, or you can check out this pad in the Amazon store in the description below. Grab a 2-prong hole punch from your kit and a hammer. Line up the 2 prongs of the hole punch over the first 2 holes in the pattern. Strike the hole punch with the hammer until you can feel the hole punch make contact with your punch pad. Apply pressure down on the pattern and wiggle the hole punch out of the newly made holes. Transfer the hole punch to the next 2 holes in the pattern and repeat the process all the way to the end. You may now remove the pattern. Confirm that all of your punched holes made it all the way through. Slice in the 2 pattern lines on the tongue material for the tongue keeper. Line the top of the tongue pattern under the hashed lines to trace and complete the lines. Cut the pattern shape out of the tongue material. I like to slice both sides first, cut away the excess on the sides, and then with this optional pair of leather scissors, carefully cut the bottom and the top of the tongue. Now the tongue is complete, you may put it aside. Step 4. Grab the upper pattern that says inside and the corresponding upper material. Note, you must flip the pattern to make the same piece on the opposite shoe. Place the pattern over the upper material. I chose to optionally tape the pattern down using low-tacked painter's tape. Trace the pattern over the upper material. Since this is a low-top shoe, I traced into the low-top lines of the pattern. Trace the outside perimeter, lace holes, and all of the corresponding stitch holes. You may put that aside. Grab the upper pattern that says outside and the corresponding upper material. Note you must flip the pattern to make the same piece on the opposite shoe. Place the pattern over the upper material. I chose to optionally tape the pattern down using low-tacked painter's tape. Trace the pattern over the upper material. Since this is a low-top shoe, I traced into the low-top lines of the pattern. Trace the outside perimeter, lace holes, and all of the corresponding stitch holes. Grab your punch surface. Place your material over the punch surface. Grab a hole punch from your kit and a hammer. Your kit contains different hole punch options. You may use whichever you like that corresponds to the distance of the holes on the pattern. Line up the hole punch over a stitch hole or holes. Strike the hole punch with the hammer until you can feel the hole punch make contact with your punch pad. Apply pressure down on the pattern and wiggle the hole punch out of the newly made hole or holes. Transfer the hole punch to the next hole in the pattern and repeat the process for every single stitch hole around the perimeter of the pattern. Please note, do not punch the lace holes yet. They require a different tool included in your kit. There are a group of 4 stitch holes at the front of the pattern. Punch those in as well. You may put that aside. Switch to your inside pattern and repeat your punch process. Once again, punch every single stitch hole around the perimeter of the pattern. At the end of this step, all of the stitch holes on your upper material should be punched out. You may put them aside. Step 5. Grab your toe tip material and your toe tip pattern. Place the pattern over your toe tip material. I chose to optionally tape the pattern down using low-tacked painter's tape. Trace the outside perimeter of the pattern and all of the corresponding stitch holes. Place the material over your punch surface. Grab a punch tool and a hammer. Punch out all of the corresponding stitch holes on the pattern. You may remove the pattern. Always confirm that your punch holes made it all the way through the material. Cut the pattern shape out of the toe tip material. I chose to use a razor knife for the top and sides and leather scissors for the bottom. Pro tip, if you don't love how your edges turn out, you can always use this optional leather wood burnishing tool. Apply pressure over the edges to smooth them out. You may put that aside. Step 6. Grab your upper patterns again. You may remove the pattern. Use the top of the pattern to complete the hash lines at the front of your low top cut line. You may optionally choose to freehand the rest of the hash lines. On the back heel, be sure to have room between the top hole and the top of the material. Cut the pattern shape out of the upper material. I chose to use a razor knife over the top, side, then bottom. Pro tip, if you keep your razor knife straight up and down, then your cut will appear more level. You may put that aside and repeat the same process with the rest of your upper material. Trace your low top line and cut the pattern out of the material. At this point, all of your upper material should be cut. Grab your punch surface and place one upper material over it. Grab the 5mm eyelet punch from your kit and a hammer. Place the end of the 5mm eyelet punch over one of the traced lace markers. Strike the punch with the hammer until you feel the punch make contact with the punch pad. I like to make a twist with the eyelet punch before I lift it to make sure the full circle is clean. Repeat the process for all of the lace holes on all of your upper material. Be sure to periodically clean the knockouts out of your eyelet punch so punching doesn't become difficult. At the end of this step, all of your eyelet holes should be punched. You may put your upper material aside. Step 7. Using your punch surface, grab your lasting board and footbed pattern. Place the pattern over the footbed. To keep them secure, you may choose to tape them together. Grab any hole punch that corresponds to the hole spacing on the pattern and a hammer. Line up the hole punch over a stitch hole. Strike the hole punch with the hammer until you can feel the hole punch make contact with your punch pad. Remove the punch and line it up over the next unpunched hole and continue all the way around the perimeter of the footbed. This will take some time as there are many holes. Just take your time, it's not a race. Verify that all of your holes made it all the way through. Optionally, I choose to transfer a line on the edge of the footbed that corresponds to each centering marker hole on the pattern. You may put your pattern and footbed aside. Step 8. Grab your punch surface, the eyelet setting punch and base tool, and a packet of eyelets in your preferred color. An eyelet assembly has two pieces, a piece with a long neck and a piece with a short neck. Grab one of your 4 upper pieces and place an eyelet with a long neck through a hole on the front side. Flip the upper over the setting base tool through the eyelet. Place an eyelet with a short neck over the assembly with the bezel up. Place the set tool over the assembly and strike the tip with a hammer until you feel the compression is complete. Repeat this process for all of the lace holes on all of your upper materials. Step 9. Grab your sewing kit, remove the thread in your preferred color, and 2 leather needles. I chose the straight 2.5 inch and 1 3/4 inch, but there is no exact right choice. Just choose whichever you're most comfortable with. Cut roughly 3 feet of your thread color. Thread a needle on one end of your thread. And then thread the other needle on the other end of your thread. Grab the inside and outside upper of one shoe, flip them to the back side, and line up the top holes. Starting from the back of your uppers, thread a needle through the top hole and pull some thread through it. And then thread the other needle through the other upper in the same corresponding hole. Pull both threads through evenly so that you have roughly the same length going through both sides. Flip your uppers over to the front side. Take one needle, thread it through the opposite corresponding hole, and pull taut. Take the other needle and thread it through the opposite corresponding hole. This creates a sturdy lock stitch. Flip your uppers to the back side. Repeat the same process you just did on the front side for added strength. Flip your uppers over to the front side We will now begin our cross stitch. Starting our X-shaped pattern, take one needle and thread it through the opposite upper, one hole down. Repeat the same process with the other needle. You should see your first X. Flip your upper to the back side and repeat the process in the next two open holes. Take one needle and thread it through the opposite upper, one hole down. Repeat the same process with the other needle. Flip the upper and you will repeat this process over and over until you get to the bottom. Remember, just take a needle and bring it through the opposite upper, one hole down each time. Once you start to get to the bottom, you should feel the upper start to make a nice 3D curvature. Once you have completed the last cross stitch, we will now do another lock stitch just like we did at the top. Take one needle and bring it through the opposite hole. Take the other needle and thread it through the opposite hole. Flip the upper and repeat again. I repeated this process 2 more times for added strength. Now you may remove the needles from the thread, tie a knot, and cut the ends. Your uppers are now attached at the heel. Step 10. Grab 2 leather needles of your choice and roughly 12 inches of thread in your preferred color. Thread one needle on one end of your thread and the other needle on the other end of your thread. Grab one toe tip material and one set of your uppers. With the curve facing up, line up one side of your toe tip material under the corresponding side of the upper. Thread one needle through the front top hole of both pieces. Thread the other needle through the second hole of both pieces. Pull them evenly so they are roughly the same length. Flip to the back side. Thread the top down into the hole below that already has thread in it. Thread the other needle through the empty hole below. Flip to the front side. Thread the top thread through the hole below it. And thread the next thread through the hole below it. Flip to the back side. Thread the top through the hole below it. and thread the next one through the empty hole below it. Flip to the front side. Thread the needle from the bottom to the hole above it, but just through the upper material. It will sandwich out of the backside between both pieces of material. Thread the other needle from the front side into the bottom hole in the same way so that it only goes through the upper material. Pull thread taut, remove the needles, tie a knot, and cut the excess. Now do the same exact process for the other side of the toe tip. Please rewind to the beginning of step 10 to hear this process repeated. It is the same exact process. At the end of this step, you should have a complete upper minus the tongue. Step 11. We will now be sewing our upper onto our lasting board. Grab a thread color that you will not need to see on the outside of the shoe from your kit. Measure out about 10 feet of thread and cut. Line up the thread ends to even out both sides of your thread. Thread a needle on one end of your thread and thread it through one of your holes in the heel that corresponds with the centering marks you already made. Thread the needle through the other end of your thread and thread it through the other hole in the heel that corresponds with the centering marks you already made. Pull them evenly so there is roughly the same length on each side. Bring the upper that belongs to that board last on top and center it over the two centering holes. Thread through the first hole on the upper. From inside the upper, thread down into the next hole in the board last. Pull taut and then thread through the next hole in the upper. From inside the upper, thread down into the next hole in the board last. Pull taut and then thread through the next hole in the upper. From inside the upper, thread down into the next hole in the board last. I'm sure you can see a pattern emerging. This will be a long process of the same task over and over. Please note that your upper should be around the perimeter of your board last and not on top of it. Once you run out of thread on one end, then you will go back to the heel, thread the other half of the thread with your needle, and just complete the other side. Continue all the way until you can overlap one end of the thread with the other. Once you are complete with both thread ends on the inside, you may unthread your needle and cut down the excess thread. You can leave some slack as this thread will be under your insole and out of the way. Now that your upper is fully stitched onto your board last, we are ready for the next step. Step 12. Grab your outsole. Place your upper into your outsole. Shift the upper towards the front of the outsole. Using your invisible ink pen, mark where the top of the outsole meets the upper around the front third of the upper. Apply pressure behind the upper towards the outsole where you are tracing for best results. This process is called dry fitting. Note that there will be a gap in the heel, and this is normal. This is because the outsole will be shaped up to the upper when bonded. Shift the upper towards the heel and then trace the rest of the upper. You may put your upper aside. Step 13. I chose to optionally prep my outsole for bonding. In my opinion, this gives our outsole the best chance to bond properly without any issues. These optional products are available with links in the description below. Over a towel to protect your table surface, grab 100% acetone and some cotton rounds. Wet a cotton round with acetone and rub it over the entire inside wall of the outsole. Using a 180 grit piece of sandpaper, lightly sand the entire inside wall of the outsole. Finally, grab one more cotton round, wet it with acetone, and clean off the entire inside wall of the outsole once more. Step 14. Applying cement glue. I recommend doing this step over a clean surface and protecting yourself from the chemical fumes. I have optionally taped plastic wrap over my work surface. I always use a respirator and open a window. The cement glue and silicone applicator I choose to use are available using the Amazon store link in the description below. Apply the cement glue to the inside wall of the outsole and make sure to get coverage all the way up to the top rim. This can be achieved using the brush that comes with your cement glue, or optionally the way I am applying it with a squeeze bottle and silicone applicator. Once the entire inside wall has coverage, you may move on to your upper. Using the same method, apply glue under your guideline and then make sure to get coverage all the way up to your line. This is pretty straightforward. Get complete coverage of cement glue underneath your guideline around the entire perimeter of your upper. Set a timer for at least 20 minutes to allow curing, and then add a second coat of cement glue for added strength. Once your second coat of cement glue is complete, set a timer for at least 20 minutes for curing before you move on to the next step. Step 15. Bonding. Set a heat gun to a low setting. The heat gun I use I have set to 250 degrees Fahrenheit. This heat gun is available in the Amazon store link in the description below. Once your cement glue has been cured, that is, dry to the touch, you may begin the bonding process. Handling your upper and outsole will be just like you did when you traced your guideline. Place your upper into your outsole and shift the upper towards the front of the outsole. Apply heat to the inside tip of the outsole for around 5 seconds. Now simply press the top of the outsole and the top of the glue line on the upper together for around 5 to 10 seconds. That section is now bonded together. Apply heat to a small section next to your new bond for around 5 seconds. Press together the section you just heated for around 5 to 10 seconds. That section is now bonded together. Apply heat to the next small section for around 5 seconds. Press together the section you just heated for around 5 to 10 seconds. That section is now bonded together. Here is a more close-up view of this task. Heat a small section for about 5 seconds, and then press the section together for around 5 to 10 seconds. Once you have reached the end of your toe tip, I recommend starting from the front again and moving towards the other end of the toe tip. Apply heat at a small section in the front for around 5 seconds, and then press the section together for around 5 to 10 seconds. Be sure to line up the top of your guideline with the top of the outsole. This is most important when bonding the curves of the shoe. Once you have bonded to both sides of the toe tip, I recommend moving to the heel next. Apply heat to the inside heel of the outsole for around 5 seconds. Press the sections together for around 5 to 10 seconds. Though the bond is complete, I do recommend keeping pressure on the heel bond while heating the next section. This is where a lot of the tension from shaping the outsole will happen. So keeping that pressure will help mitigate the tension on the heel. Just heat the next section for 5 seconds and apply pressure for 5 to 10 seconds. Keep that pressure while you apply heat on the next small section for 5 seconds, and I think you get the idea now. Complete the curvature around the heel on one side, and then go back to the center of the heel and complete the curvature around the heel to the other side. Now you can complete the entire side of one shoe, moving from the heel to the bond you created in the front. Finally, you can now finish the bond on the other side of the shoe from the heel to the front, and your bond is now complete. Step 16. Stitching the outsole. Grab the stitching awl and your choice of thread color from your kit. Measure out 2 lengths at 5 feet each. Thread the stitching awl down to the handle length and pierce the needle through the outsole at the center of the heel. Pull the needle about halfway to create a loop inside. Hold the short end of the thread down on the handle with your thumb and pull the long length of the thread all the way into the shoe. Pull the entire length of thread out of the needle. Then finally, pull the stitching awl out. This is your backstitch thread. You should have roughly 6 inches of thread sticking out of the outsole and the rest inside the shoe. Grab your other thread and thread the stitching awl down the handle length once again. Pierce through the same hole you made previously. Pull the needle out about halfway to create a loop inside. Pull the short length of the thread inside the shoe, leaving the long length outside of the shoe. Hold that inside thread as you pull the stitching awl out. Notice the thread is still on the stitching awl, and this is correct. Now, your stitch lengths are up to you. I try to keep them around 1/2 inch, but there is no correct unit of measurement. Please note, always try to keep a loop between threads to make the process easier. Pierce through your next hole. Pull halfway to create a loop. Always shape your loop so that it is always on the side of the needle that your previous stitch was on. Pull the entire length of your backstitch thread through the loop. Once your backstitch length is passed all the way through, you may remove the stitching awl. You may pull the stitch until it is neatly taut. Grab the stitching awl, make a nice loop, and pierce your next hole. Pull about halfway to create a loop. Pull the backstitch thread all the way through your loop. Pull the stitching awl out. Pull your stitches until they are neatly taut. And then do the process again. That's pierce, make a loop, pull the backstitch through the loop, pull out the stitching awl, neatly tighten. Pierce, make a loop, pull the backstitch through the loop, pull out the stitching awl, neatly tighten. Pierce, make a loop, pull the backstitch through the loop, pull out the stitching awl, neatly tighten. This process is repeated all the way around the outsole. If you should run out of thread, just start your next hole with a new thread. The process will be the same. Once you have reached your first thread again, pull the remainders of the thread inside the shoe. Cut the ends evenly inside of the shoe. The length doesn't matter as they will be under your insole. Your outsole is now complete. Step 17. Stitching the tongue. Grab 2 leather needles from your kit. You may choose to use a curved needle for this process as it may be easier for you. Grab your choice of thread color and measure out about 5 feet. Thread one end of the thread on one needle and the other end of the thread on the other needle. You will line up the first hole on your tongue material with the top hole of your toe tip stitch. Push one needle through the top hole of a toe tip stitch and then thread it through the first hole on the tongue material. Take the other needle and thread it through both the next hole on the toe tip and the next hole on the tongue material. Pull thread so they are both about even on both sides. Stitch your first hole into your second hole and out the front. Now bring that same needle into the next hole in both materials. And now you play leapfrog all the way to the end. Bring the first stitch through the second and then back into a new hole. You are going to repeat this leapfrog process to the end. Keep your threads taut to give yourself a nice round shape in the front of the shoe. Once you bring your last stitch out, thread it back to the previous hole to create a lock stitch. You may remove your needles, cut your threads, and tie a knot. Now to lock the tongue in place, we will do a simple cross stitch on each side. Using your invisible ink pen, mark out the holes on the upper where they land on the tongue on each side. Using your stitching awl, pierce through the 4 holes on each side of the tongue. Using the 2 needle method once more, cut 2 sets of roughly 18 inches of your preferred thread color. On your first thread, thread 1 needle on one end and the other needle on the other end. From the inside of the shoe, thread 1 needle through the tongue and upper. Thread the other needle through an opposite hole in both materials. Now thread 1 needle across to the opposite hole, creating your first stitch line. Now thread the other needle across the opposite hole to reinforce that stitch line. From the inside, bring 1 needle out of one of the empty holes. Bring the other needle out of the last empty hole. Thread 1 needle across through the opposite hole to create another stitch line. Now thread the last needle across the opposite hole to reinforce that stitch line. You may remove your needles, tie a knot, and cut the excess. Perform the same task for the other side of the tongue. Step 18, the finishing touches. Grab your insole and fit it into your shoe. Grab your preferred lace colors out of your kit. Lace up your new shoes in your preferred method, and congratulations! You just made a pair of your very own sneakers. You should be very proud. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact the Shoemakers Academy. We are here to help. Thank you for your support, and we hope that you love your new handmade footwear.